All right, guys, we're really going to get into adding and subtracting fractions. We're going to become pros at this. You're going to learn how to find the common denominator in an unlike denominator when you have an unlike denominator. I feel the most important thing is to find the least common denominator, but that's not how they feel. I do know that from now on, I don't even want it questioned, even if it's not in the directions. You always simplify your answer to the simplest form. So let's look at this and say Malaya bought shell beads and glass beads to weave into a design in her basket. She bought 1/4 pound of shell beads and 3/8 pounds of glass beads. How many pounds of beads did she buy? Well, I know that I'm going to add them together because it was like I put all my beads together in a thing and I want to know how much. One way they've said you may do it. A lot of kids like this way because they think it's easier to not even have to find the least common denominator. But so you think of what's 4 times 8, and we know that that's 32. Now, where did the 4 times 8 come from? They just multiplied the 4 and the 8 as the denominators because you know they're going to have a common denominator. So here's how you would write it. You take it times 8/8 because what did I take 4 times to get there? I took it times 8/8. So what I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. So it's 32, 8/32. And over here, I would take it times 4/4 because I got to do the opposite of what I did up here. 32. See how I got a common denominator with that? That was pretty easy. And then 3 times 4, because what you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator, I get 12. Well, then I get 20/32. And I know that the common factors of 20 is 2, 4, 5. So what do I know my common factors of 32 is? 2, 4. Well, I found something that I can divide them both by. So I'm going to divide them both by 4. And 20 divided by 4 to get the simplest form is 5. 32 divided by 4 is 8. So my answer in the simplest form is 5/8. All right. This is the way I like to do it. I think it helps so that you don't have to simplify so much. It's already in the simplest form, but you have to use what works best. So let's try both ways. So when you're finding the least common denominator, you got to find the least common multiple of these two. So 4, 8. Well, I really don't have to go any further because I know 8 is a multiple of 8. So my least common denominator is going to be 8. So what do I got to, so if I know they're both going to be 8, here's where I'm going to put my 8s because those are my denominators. Now, I took 4 times what to get to 8? I took 4 times 2 to get to 8. So that means I have to do that to my numerator because what I do to my denominator, I have to do to my numerator. So 1 times 2 is 2 8s. All right. Now, if I look at here, well, 8 times what got me to 8? Well, 1. So 3 times 1 is 3, so it just moved it over. And my common denominator is 8, so I just have to add my numerators, which is 5/8. I didn't have to simplify. Now, will I always never have to simplify? Not necessarily, but your chances are greater. So you decide which one of these two ways you like. Let's move on. Now, we use the same method, the same exact method when we are subtracting. It's the same exact thing, and I'll show you both ways. We can take these two times each other, and we would get 50. So 50 would be, so 10 times 5 would get me to 50. So I got to do that to my numerator. So 9 times 5 is 45. 5 times 10 is 50. 5 times 2 is 20. Okay, now I would just subtract those. And 45 subtracted by 20, if I subtract those, I get 25. Well, that's not in its simplest form, but I know that both of these can be divided by 25, because 25 can go into 50, so I divide them both by 25 and I get 1/2. So that's using just the common denominator between the two of them. I told you I like to find the least common denominator, so I look at these and I know that 10 is a common denominator of 5. So I'm just going to leave it as a 10, and I know this will be 9/10. But how did I get 10 here? Well, I took 5 times 2 got me to 10, so that means I have to do that here. And if I take this times 2, that's going to be 4, and I got 5/10. When I subtracted 9 from 4, I got 5/10. I still have to simplify, but I know 5 can go into 10, so I divide them both by 5, and I get 1/2. Smaller numbers to work with. I told you sometimes you'll have to simplify, but not very often. Here was a case I had to. So decide which way you want to do them. Do you want to use the common denominator or the least common denominator? So what I want you to do is I want you, and I don't care which method you use, I want you to work with your partner, and your partner, you may use 2 different methods. That's fine. You may use the common denominator and they may use the least common denominator. You still should get the same answer. So I want you to work all of these problems. And once you've worked all of these problems, you get the same answer, you're really understanding it, then I want you to come talk to me. Because then I want to watch you and your partner do a couple of these. Once I think you really understand it, then guess what? I want you to, once you really understand it, then we'll move on. But you have to show it to me. When I'm coming over to talk to you guys, we're going to do these together. Because we got to find out what is the part we're going to subtract to get to that. What part are we going to add in are we going to put in there? We got to almost work backwards, and I'd like to work with you individually, together as a group, to do those problems. So once we have that down, and you've talked to me, you are just going to move on to the evens here, except for 12. And no surprise, 1 or 2 in all of these. Then if you get those done and you're really starting to understand this, please let's go back and let's finish 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21 and 22. Let's get as many of those as we possibly can done, because it's only going to make you stronger in subtracting and adding fractions. Okay. Here we go.